My sister-in-law Amanda sat in the witness chair, her perfectly manicured hands folded in her lap, radiating the same false innocence that had fooled everyone for 3 years. She had no idea that the advanced psychological evaluation machine, humming beside her, was about to expose every lie she had told about my daughter's death. What she also didn't know was that I had spent the last year gathering evidence that would prove she was the one responsible for Lily drowning at Pine Lake, not me. The courtroom was packed with family members, reporters, and curious onlookers who had followed the tragic story of the Carter family. To them, I was the negligent mother who let her 5-year-old daughter die while she was supposedly distracted. Amanda was the grieving aunt who had tried desperately to save Lily's life. But today, the truth would finally surface, and Amanda's carefully constructed web of lies would unravel in front of everyone. Dr. Sarah Chen, the forensic psychologist operating the evaluation equipment, looked at me with professional sympathy. This wasn't just another case for her. She understood what it meant for a mother to be falsely accused of causing her own child's death. The machine before us represented hope, justice, and vindication, all rolled into one sleek piece of technology that could read stress patterns, detect deception, and even reconstruct memory sequences with startling accuracy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years ago, I would never have imagined sitting in a courthouse, fighting for my reputation, my sanity, and the truth about how my beautiful daughter died. The Jessica Carter who walked into the Riverside County courthouse that morning was not the same broken woman who had fled Oregon in shame and devastation. I had been reborn in Phoenix, transformed by pain into someone who refused to accept injustice, someone who would fight until the very last breath to clear her name and honor her daughter's memory. The hearing had been Amanda's idea, believe it or not, in her supreme arrogance. She had suggested that we both submit to the new psychological evaluation technology to finally put all doubts to rest. About what happened that terrible day at Pine Lake, she was so confident in her ability to manipulate the situation, so certain that her version of events was unshakable, that she practically demanded we go through with it. My lawyer had warned me that it was risky, that even innocent people sometimes showed stress responses that could be misinterpreted. But I knew this was my only chance to prove what really happened. Michael, my former husband, sat in the front row with his parents, Robert and Linda Carter. The sight of him still caused a sharp pain in my chest, not because I loved him anymore, but because of how completely he had abandoned me when I needed him most. The man who had promised to love me through sickness and health, for better or worse, had turned his back on me within hours of our daughter's death. He had chosen to believe his sister's lies over his wife's desperate pleas for understanding and support. Robert Carter, the family patriarch and owner of Carter Construction, had made his position clear from the beginning. In his mind, family loyalty meant protecting Amanda at all costs, even if it meant destroying me in the process. He had used his considerable wealth and influence to shape the narrative around Lily's death, ensuring that the media painted me as the negligent mother and Amanda as the heroic aunt who had done everything possible to save my child. The truth was so much more complicated and so much more sinister than anyone could have imagined. For 3 years, I had carried the weight of not just grief over losing Lily, but the additional burden of being blamed for her death by the very people who should have supported me. Every night, I relived those final moments at Pine Lake, searching my memory for what I might have missed, what I could have done differently, how I had failed my precious daughter. But as the months passed and I slowly began to heal in my new life in Phoenix, I started to notice inconsistencies in the story everyone had accepted as truth. Little details that didn't quite fit, timeline issues that no one else seemed to question, and most importantly, Amanda's behavior in the days and weeks following the accident. There was something about the way she had inserted herself into every conversation about that day, the way she had been so quick to provide explanations for things that didn't need explaining, that made me start to wonder if everything I had been told about my own child's death was a lie. Psychological evaluation machine that would determine our fate was a marvel of modern technology. It's capable of detecting the subtlest changes in brain activity, stress hormones, and neural patterns. That indicated deception. Unlike traditional polygraph tests, which could be fooled by someone skilled in controlling their physiological responses. This system analyzed thousands of data points simultaneously, creating a comprehensive picture of truthfulness that was virtually impossible to fake. Dr. Chen had explained the process to us in detail. We would each be connected to the machine while recounting our memories of that day, and the system would analyze not just our words, but our brain activity, stress levels, eye movements, micro-expressions, and even the consistency of our stories. When cross-referenced with physical evidence from the scene, it was like having a window directly into our minds, one that would reveal not just what we said, but what we truly believed to be true. Amanda had listened to this explanation with what appeared to be calm acceptance, even volunteering to go, first to get it over with. But I caught the briefest flicker of uncertainty in her eyes when Dr. Chen mentioned that the machine could detect not just intentional lies, but also buried memories that the conscious mind might be suppressing. For someone who had built her entire defense on a carefully constructed version of events, the possibility that suppressed memories might surface had to be terrifying. The Carter family had always been a complicated dynamic, but Lily's death had exposed fault lines that I never knew existed. Michael and Amanda had grown up in a household where appearance and reputation mattered more than truth, where protecting the family name took precedence over individual accountability. Robert Carter had built his construction empire on the principle that Carters never backed down, never admitted fault, and never let outsiders threaten the family's standing in the community. When I married Michael 8 years ago, I thought I was joining a loving, supportive family. The Carters seemed like everything my own modest upbringing had lacked: wealth, stability, tradition, and most importantly, unconditional love and loyalty among family members. It took me years to understand that their loyalty was conditional, that it extended only to those who served the family's interests, and that an outsider like me would always be expendable if the family's reputation was at stake. Amanda had never liked me, though she was skilled at hiding her resentment behind polite smiles and sisterly gestures. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She was 2 years younger than Michael, but had always been treated as the princess of the family, doted on by her parents, and protected by her big brother. My marriage to Michael had disrupted that dynamic, creating a new hierarchy where I, as Michael's wife and the mother of his child, suddenly held a position that Amanda felt should have remained hers. The signs of her jealousy had been there from the beginning, but I had been too naive or too hopeful to recognize them for what they were. The way she would make subtle digs about my background, questioning whether I really understood the Carter family's values and traditions. The way she would insert herself into conversations between Michael and me, redirecting his attention back to family matters that didn't include me. The way she would make plans with Michael that excluded me, then act surprised when I felt left out. But it was her relationship with Lily that should have been my biggest warning sign. Amanda claimed to adore her niece, and on the surface, she appeared to be a loving, attentive aunt. But there were moments when I caught her looking at Lily with something that wasn't quite love, something that seemed more like calculation. Lily represented my permanent place in the Carter family, my unbreakable connection to Michael, and I think Amanda resented that more than she could ever admit. The annual Carter family reunion at Pine Lake had been a tradition for over 20 years. Robert had purchased the lakefront property when the construction business first became profitable, and every summer, the extended family would gather there. For a long weekend of swimming, fishing, barbecues, and bonding, it should have been a celebration, a chance for Lily to play with her cousins and create the kind of happy childhood memories that would last a lifetime. But instead, it became the setting for the worst day of my life, the day that changed everything, and set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately destroy my marriage, my relationship with my in-laws, and nearly destroy me as well. The lake that had hosted so many happy family gatherings became the place where my daughter died, where my world fell apart, and where Amanda's lies began to take root. As Dr. Chen made final adjustments to the evaluation equipment, I thought, about the woman I had become during my 3 years in Phoenix. The broken, grief-stricken mother who had fled Oregon in disgrace was gone, replaced by someone harder, more determined, and infinitely more dangerous to those who had wronged her. I had spent months in therapy, working through not just my grief over losing Lily, but my anger over being blamed for her death. I had rebuilt my life from nothing, starting over in a new city with a new job and a new sense of purpose. The Jessica Carter who was about to face this evaluation was not the same woman who had been so easily dismissed and discredited 3 years ago. I had learned to trust my instincts, to question narratives that seemed too convenient, and most importantly, to fight for the truth even when everyone else had given up on it. Amanda might have fooled my former family, the media, and even the police, but she wasn't going to fool this machine. And she certainly wasn't going to fool me anymore. The courtroom fell silent as Dr. Chen announced that we were ready to begin. Amanda straightened in her chair, putting on her game face for what she clearly believed would be her final victory over me. But as I looked at her sitting there, radiating false confidence and manufactured innocence, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Hope that the truth would finally come out. Hope that my daughter's memory would be cleared of the shadow that Amanda's lies had cast over it, and hope that justice, however delayed, would finally prevail. The psychological evaluation was about to begin, and with it, the unraveling of the biggest lie the Carter family had ever told. Amanda had spent 3 years believing she had gotten away with the perfect crime that she had successfully destroyed. Me, while elevating herself to hero status in the family, she was about to learn that some truths are too powerful to stay buried forever, and that the technology designed to reveal those truths was far more sophisticated than her ability to hide them. As the machine hummed to life and Dr. Chen prepared to begin the evaluation, I closed my eyes for a moment and thought about Lily, my beautiful, intelligent, loving daughter, who deserved so much better than to have her death turned into a weapon against her own mother. Today, finally, I would be able to tell her story the way it really happened, not the twisted version that Amanda had fed to everyone who would listen. The time for lies was over. The time for truth had finally come. Dr. Sarah Chen moved with practiced precision as she calibrated the psychological evaluation system, her fingers dancing across the touchscreen interface while the machine's sensors hummed with quiet efficiency. The Cognitive Truth Analysis System, or CTAs as she called it, represented 15 years of research into the neurological markers of deception and memory formation. Unlike the crude polygraph machines of decades past, this equipment could peer directly into the subconscious mind, detecting not just intentional lies, but the subtle inconsistencies that emerged when someone had convinced themselves of a false narrative. Amanda watched the preparation with what appeared to be mild interest, occasionally glancing at her manicured nails or smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her designer dress. She had chosen her outfit carefully for this day, a navy blue ensemble that conveyed both professionalism and sympathy. The perfect costume for a grieving aunt who had supposedly watched helplessly as her beloved niece drowned. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a soft chignon, and her makeup was flawless but understated, creating the impression of natural beauty enhanced by grief and determination to see justice done. The confidence radiating from Amanda was almost palpable. She had spent 3 years perfecting her version of events, repeating it so many times to police investigators, family members, reporters, and anyone else who would listen, that she had almost certainly convinced herself it was true. That was the insidious nature of certain types of personality disorders. Dr. Chen had explained to me during our pre-hearing consultation. Some people became so skilled at manipulation and self-deception that they could pass traditional lie detector tests simply because they had rewritten their own memories to match their lies. But the CTAs was different. It didn't just measure stress responses or physiological reactions to questions. Instead, it created a comprehensive map of brain activity during memory recall, cross-referencing neural patterns with known markers for genuine versus constructed memories. It could detect the subtle differences between remembering something that actually happened and remembering something that had been rehearsed, imagined, or deliberately fabricated. Most importantly for our case, it could identify suppressed memories that the conscious mind had buried due to trauma or guilt. Michael sat rigid in the front row, his jaw clenched so tightly that I could see the muscles working beneath his skin. The past 3 years had not been kind to him either, though his suffering was self-inflicted in a way that mine had never been. He had aged noticeably since Lily's death, his once thick dark hair now showing streaks of premature gray, and his face had developed deep lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. Part of me wondered if he had ever questioned Amanda's version of events, if there had been moments in the dark hours before dawn when doubt crept in and he wondered whether he had destroyed his marriage based on lies. The relationship between Michael and Amanda had always been complex, rooted in childhood dynamics that I never fully understood until it was too late. Robert Carter had raised his children with very specific expectations about family loyalty and hierarchy. Michael, as the eldest son, was groomed from birth to take over the construction business and carry on the Carter name with honor and distinction. Amanda, as the baby of the family and the only daughter, was protected and indulged, but also held 2 different standards than her brother. Where Michael was expected to be strong, responsible, and decisive, Amanda was allowed to be emotional, impulsive, and dependent on others to solve her problems. This dynamic had created a relationship where Michael felt responsible for his sister's well-being and Amanda felt entitled to his protection and support. When my marriage to Michael had threatened that dynamic, Amanda had responded with increasing hostility disguised as concern for her brother's happiness and success. Looking back now with the clarity that comes from distance and painful experience, I could see how Amanda had been systematically undermining my relationship with Michael from the very beginning. It had started small with casual comments about how different my background was from theirs, how I might not understand the pressures that came with being part of a prominent family business. She would suggest that I seemed overwhelmed by social events or that I didn't quite fit in with their established circle of friends and associates. As time went on, her efforts became more sophisticated and more damaging. She would create situations where I would be excluded from family decisions or left out of important conversations. She would share intimate details about Michael's childhood and family history that made me feel like an outsider, then act surprised when I seemed hurt or confused by references I didn't understand. Most insidiously, she would plant seeds of doubt about my motivations for marrying Michael, suggesting to anyone who would listen that I had been attracted more to the Carter family's wealth and status than to Michael himself. The arrival of Lily had shifted this dynamic in ways that I think surprised everyone, including Amanda herself. Suddenly, I wasn't just Michael's wife who might eventually be divorced or pushed aside. I was the mother of the next generation of Carters, permanently cemented into the family structure in a way that Amanda couldn't undermine or eliminate. Lily represented not just my love for Michael, but my irrevocable place in the Carter family legacy. Amanda's relationship with Lily had been complicated from the start. Publicly, she played the role of the devoted aunt perfectly, showering Lily with expensive gifts, volunteering to babysit, and posting endless photos on social media that portrayed her as a loving and involved family member. But privately, I had noticed troubling signs that I had dismissed at the time as my own paranoia or jealousy. There were moments when Amanda would hold Lily just a little too tightly, her grip becoming possessive rather than affectionate. She would make comments about how Lily looked more like a Carter than like me, as if she were trying to claim ownership of my daughter's identity. Most disturbing were the times when she would undermine my parenting decisions, contradicting my rules or boundaries when she thought I wasn't listening, then acting innocent when I confronted her about it. Dr. Chen finished her calibrations and turned to address the courtroom. Her voice was clear and professional as she explained the process we were about to undergo. Each of us would be connected to the CTA system through a combination of sensors that would monitor brain activity, eye movement, vocal stress patterns, and microexpressions. We would then be asked to recount our memories of the day Lily died, starting from the morning and continuing through the discovery of her body in the lake. The system would analyze our responses in real time, comparing our neural patterns to established baselines for truthful memory recall. Any inconsistencies, fabrications, or suppressed memories would be immediately flagged and displayed on the large monitor visible to everyone in the courtroom. The process was non-invasive and completely painless, Dr. Chen assured us, though some people experienced mild discomfort from the intensity of reliving traumatic memories in such detail. Amanda volunteered to go first, just as I had expected she would. Her confidence was unshakable, built on 3 years of successful deception and the belief that she had crafted the perfect lie. She settled into the examination chair with a slight smile, arranging her skirt carefully and folding her hands in her lap like a model posing for a portrait. The image she projected was one of calm cooperation, a woman with nothing to hide who was eager to finally put all doubts to rest. As Dr. Chen attached the various sensors and monitoring devices, Amanda made small talk about the weather and how impressed she was with the courthouse's renovation. Her demeanor was relaxed, almost cheerful, as if we were gathering for a pleasant social occasion rather than a hearing that would determine the truth about a child's death. This casual attitude was all part of her performance, I realized. Another way of reinforcing the narrative that she was the innocent party who had nothing to fear from this process. The sensors that would read Amanda's brain activity were nearly invisible, thin as hair and attached with a clear adhesive that left no marks. The tracking system required her to look directly into a small camera mounted on the chair's headrest, while vocal analysis would be conducted through a wireless microphone clipped to her dress collar. The entire setup looked more like a high-tech spa treatment than a forensic examination, which I suspected was intentional to keep subjects calm and cooperative. Michael watched his sister's preparation with obvious anxiety, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Despite his complete faith in Amanda's version of events, the technology clearly made him nervous. Perhaps he understood on some level that this examination would be different from the police interviews and depositions where Amanda had performed so flawlessly. This machine couldn't be charmed or manipulated the way human investigators could. B. Robert and Linda Carter sat on either side of their son, their faces masks of polite attention that didn't quite hide their underlying tension. They had built their family's reputation on control and careful management of public perception, and this hearing represented a significant risk to everything they had worked to achieve. If Amanda's story began to unravel under technological scrutiny, the damage to the Carter name would extend far beyond this courtroom. The construction business that Robert had built from nothing depended heavily on trust and reputation within the community. Carter Construction had weathered economic downturns, industry scandals, and fierce competition by maintaining an image of integrity and family values. A revelation that Amanda had been lying about Lily's death, or worse, that she had been directly responsible for it, would destroy not just her credibility, but the entire family's standing in Riverside. Dr. Chen completed her setup and asked Amanda if she was ready to begin. Amanda nodded with enthusiasm, her smile brightening as if she were looking forward to finally telling her story under these definitive conditions. She had probably rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times, imagining how vindicated she would feel when the machine confirmed every detail of her account and proved once and for all that I was the negligent mother who had caused my own daughter's death. The irony of Amanda's confidence wasn't lost on me. She had spent so much time and energy constructing her false narrative that she had become its most devoted believer. In her mind, she wasn't just lying to protect herself, she was revealing the truth about my failures as a mother and her own heroic efforts to save Lily's life. This self-deception had made her lies more convincing to others. But it would also make her downfall more spectacular when the technology revealed what had really happened that day. As the CTA system came online and began its baseline readings, I found myself thinking about the last conversation I had with Lily before we left for Pine Lake that weekend. She had been so excited about the family reunion, chattering endlessly about swimming with her cousins and roasting marshmallows around the campfire. She had packed her favorite stuffed animal, a worn teddy bear named Mr. Buttons that she never traveled without, and had insisted on wearing her new pink swimsuit under her clothes so she would be ready to go swimming the moment we arrived. That memory was so vivid, so pure in its happiness and innocence, that it stood in stark contrast to everything that had happened afterward. Lily had trusted all of us to keep her safe, to watch over her, to make sure that her exciting weekend The lake would be filled with nothing but joy and laughter. Instead, someone in that trusted circle had failed her in the most catastrophic way possible, and then had compounded that failure by lying about what had really happened. The preliminary readings from Amanda's CTA's evaluation showed normal stress, levels consistent with someone facing an important but manageable situation. Her brain activity patterns indicated alertness and focus, while her physiological responses suggested confidence rather than anxiety. To any casual observer, these readings would confirm that Amanda was telling the truth. She had nothing to hide and was genuinely committed to clearing up any lingering doubts about the events at Pine Lake. But Dr. Chen had warned me that initial readings could be deceiving, especially with someone who had spent years perfecting their deception. The real test would come when Amanda began recounting specific details about that day, when the machine could analyze not just her stress levels, but the actual neural patterns associated with memory formation and recall. That was when we would see whether Amanda's confident facade could withstand the scrutiny of technology designed specifically to detect the kind of lies she had been telling. The courtroom fell silent as Dr. Chen asked Amanda to begin her account. Of the morning Lily died, Amanda took a deep breath, her smile never wavering, and launched into the story she had told so many times before. But this time, every word would be analyzed, every pause scrutinized, every micro-expression catalogued and compared to known patterns of deception and truth. The moment of reckoning had finally arrived. Amanda Wells was about to discover that some lies are too big to hide, even from yourself. Amanda's voice carried the perfect note of sorrowful determination as she began her testimony, her words flowing with the practiced ease of someone who had told this story countless times. The CTA's system registered her initial responses as calm and consistent, exactly what anyone would expect from someone telling the truth about a traumatic but clearly remembered event. Her hands remained folded in her lap, her breathing steady, and her eye contact with Dr. Chen unwavering as she described the morning of Lily's death. We had all gathered at the lake house for our annual family reunion, Amanda began, her voice carrying just the right amount of emotion to sound genuine without seeming rehearsed. Lily was so excited that morning, running around in her little pink swimsuit, asking everyone when we could go swimming. She was such a beautiful child, so full of life and energy. It breaks my heart to think about how happy she was just hours before. The monitor displaying Amanda's neurological patterns showed steady, consistent readings that indicated truthful recall. Her brain activity matched the expected patterns for someone accessing genuine memories, and her stress levels remained within normal parameters for discussing difficult events. To anyone watching those displays, Amanda appeared to be exactly what she claimed to be, a loving aunt recounting the tragic loss of her beloved niece. But I knew better. I had watched Amanda perform this same routine for police detectives, insurance investigators, family members, and reporters. She had perfected every gesture, every pause, every catch in her voice that would maximize the emotional impact of her words. What made her so dangerous wasn't just her ability to lie, but her skill at making those lies feel like deeply personal, painful truths. Dr. Chen guided Amanda through the timeline of that morning with professional precision, asking for specific details about who was where, what activities were planned, and how the family had organized supervision of the children. Painted a picture of a well-coordinated family gathering where everyone understood their responsibilities and took child safety seriously. According to her version, I had specifically volunteered to watch Lily, while the other adults prepared lunch and set up the afternoon activities. Jessica seemed distracted that morning, Amanda continued, her voice taking on a subtle note of concern that suggested reluctant honesty rather than deliberate character assassination. She kept checking her phone, and when Michael asked her about it, she said she was waiting for an important call about a job interview. I remember thinking it was strange that she would schedule something like that during our family weekend, but I didn't want to cause any tension by saying anything. The job interview detail was a masterful addition to Amanda's narrative, one that she had introduced gradually over the months following Lily's death. It provided a plausible explanation for why I might have been distracted, while also subtly undermining my priorities as a mother. The truth was that I had been expecting a call from my sister about our father's medical test results. But Amanda's version made me sound like someone who put career ambitions ahead of family time. Michael's reaction to this part of Amanda's testimony was visible, even from across the courtroom. His jaw tightened, and his hands clenched into fists as he remembered that morning and the argument we had about my phone usage. He had accused me of being antisocial and distracted, not understanding that I was worried sick about my father's health. Amanda's strategic revelation of the job interview had provided him with a retroactive justification for his anger, making him feel vindicated in his criticism of my behavior. The CTA system continued to register Amanda's responses as consistent with truthful recall, but Dr. Chen had warned me that the technology's real power emerged when examining more complex memories and emotional associations. The baseline readings were important, but they only told part of the story. The machine's ability to detect deception would become more pronounced as Amanda moved into the actual events surrounding Lily's death. Amanda described the lunch preparations with remarkable detail, explaining how various family members had taken on different tasks to ensure the meal was ready on time. She painted herself as the helpful sister-in-law who had volunteered for the less glamorous jobs, cleaning up after the children and making sure everyone had what they needed. In her version, I had been assigned the simple task of watching Lily and her cousins while they played near the water, responsibility that required nothing more than basic attention and common sense. The way Amanda told it, she had been in the kitchen washing dishes when she heard shouting from the lake area. She had immediately dropped what she was doing and rushed outside to find me standing on the dock, screaming for help, according to her testimony. I had been so panicked and incoherent that it took several precious minutes to understand what had happened. By the time she and Michael reached the water, Lily had been underwater for an unknown amount of time. I dove in immediately, Amanda continued, her voice breaking slightly as she described her supposed rescue efforts. The water was murky near the shore, and it took me forever to find her. When I finally did, she was so small and still, lying on the bottom like a little doll. I pulled her up and tried to give her CPR, but she was already gone. I kept trying anyway, hoping against hope that we could bring her back, but it was too late. The emotional impact of Amanda's testimony was undeniable. Several people in the courtroom were visibly moved, and even Dr. Chen's professional demeanor softened slightly as she listened to the account. Amanda's description of finding Lily's body and attempting CPR was so vivid and heartbreaking that it would have been easy to forget that we were listening to someone who might be lying about the most important details. But the CTA system was designed to look beyond emotional manipulation and examine the underlying neurological patterns that revealed truth from fiction. As Amanda moved into the most critical part of her testimony, the machine began to register subtle changes in her brain activity that suggested something more complex than simple memory recall. The patterns weren't dramatic enough to indicate outright deception, but they showed the kind of neural activity associated with constructed or heavily rehearsed narratives. Amanda's account of the rescue attempt was particularly detailed, with specific information about water temperature, visibility, and the physical challenges of performing CPR on a small child. She described the desperate minutes when the family had worked together trying to revive Lily, their growing realization that their efforts were futile, and the devastating moment when they had to accept that she was gone. Throughout this portion of her testimony, Amanda maintained perfect emotional control, allowing just enough genuine grief to show through without becoming overwhelmed by the memories. The timeline Amanda presented was consistent with the official police investigation, which had concluded that Lily had been unsupervised for approximately 15 to 20 minutes before her body was discovered. This window of time was crucial to Amanda's narrative, as it provided a plausible explanation for how a drowning could occur without anyone noticing. According to her version, I had been so focused on my phone call that I had failed to notice Lily moving from the shallow play area to the deeper water near the dock. What made Amanda's testimony particularly insidious was the way she managed to criticize my actions while maintaining the appearance of defending me. She repeatedly emphasized how much I loved Lily, how devastated I was by her death, and how the tragedy had obviously been an accident rather than intentional negligence. But woven throughout these seemingly supportive statements were subtle suggestions that I had been distracted, overwhelmed, and ultimately responsible for failing to protect my own child. The courtroom atmosphere grew increasingly tense as Amanda moved toward the conclusion of her initial testimony. Her description of the aftermath of Lily's death was methodical and precise, covering the arrival of emergency responders, the futile attempts at resuscitation, and the terrible moment when the paramedics had officially pronounced Lily dead. She recounted how I had collapsed completely, becoming hysterical and incoherent, while she and Michael had handled the practical necessities of dealing with the authorities and making arrangements for Lily's body. Dr. Chen monitored the CTA's readings carefully as Amanda finished her account, noting the subtle but significant changes in neural patterns that had emerged during the most critical portions of her testimony. The machine had detected what appeared to be genuine emotional responses to the traumatic memories. But there were also indicators suggesting that some elements of Amanda's story had been heavily rehearsed or potentially fabricated. The most interesting readings came from Amanda's descriptions of her own actions during the rescue attempt. While her emotional responses appeared genuine, her brain activity patterns suggested that she was recalling events that had been repeatedly practiced or visualized rather than spontaneously remembered. This could indicate either that Amanda had spent considerable time rehearsing her testimony, or that some elements of her rescue story were based on imagination rather than actual experience. Michael's reaction to his sister's testimony was complex and revealing. While he clearly wanted to believe every word Amanda said, there were moments when his expression suggested doubt or confusion. Perhaps he was remembering details that didn't quite match Amanda's account, or maybe he was simply struggling with the emotional weight of reliving that terrible day. Whatever the cause, his unwavering support for Amanda seemed to be developing some cracks. Robert and Linda Carter maintained their stoic expressions throughout Amanda's testimony, but their body language spoke volumes about their internal state. Robert's hands were clasped tightly in his lap, his knuckles white with tension, while Linda clutched her purse like a lifeline. They had built their family's reputation on control and careful management of public perception, and this hearing represented a significant threat to everything they had worked to achieve. The construction business that Robert had built from nothing depended heavily on trust and reputation within the community. Carter Construction had weathered economic downturns, industry scandals, and fierce competition by maintaining an image of integrity and family values. If Amanda's story began to unravel under technological scrutiny, the damage to the Carter name would extend far beyond this courtroom, potentially affecting contracts, business relationships, and the family's standing in Riverside society. As Amanda concluded her initial testimony, Dr. Chen asked if she was ready to proceed to the detailed questioning phase. This was where the CTA system would truly demonstrate its capabilities, using targeted questions to explore inconsistencies, gaps, and potential deceptions in Amanda's account. The machine would analyze not just her verbal responses, but her micro-expressions, eye movements, and neurological patterns to create a comprehensive assessment of her truthfulness. Amanda nodded confidently, her smile never wavering as she prepared for what she clearly believed would be her final vindication. She had spent 3 years building her case against me, carefully constructing a narrative that painted her as the heroic aunt who had done everything possible to save Lily's life. In her mind, this technological examination would simply confirm what she had been saying all along, that I was the negligent mother who had failed to protect my own child. But I knew something that Amanda didn't. During my 3 years in Phoenix, I had done more than just rebuild my life and learn to cope with my grief. I had also conducted my own investigation into what had really happened that day at Pine Lake. I had hired private investigators, consulted with water safety experts, and most importantly, I had discovered evidence that contradicted key elements of Amanda's story. Phone records that Amanda claimed showed me distracted by a job interview actually revealed that I had been trying desperately to reach emergency services, not conducting any kind of professional conversation. The timeline she had established for the drowning was contradicted by witness statements that had never been included in the official police report. Most damning of all, I had discovered that Amanda had been lying about her own whereabouts during the critical time when Lily had supposedly drowned. The evidence I had gathered wouldn't be admissible in a criminal trial, but it had given me crucial insight into what the CTA's system was likely to discover when it examined Amanda's testimony. In detail, her confident performance was about to be subjected to the most sophisticated lie detection technology ever developed, and I was finally going to learn whether my suspicions about that terrible day were justified. Dr. Chen began the detailed, questioning phase by asking Amanda to describe her exact location and activities during the 30 minutes before Lily's body was discovered. This was a crucial period in Amanda's narrative. It established her alibi and explained why she hadn't been available to supervise the children. Amanda's response came smoothly, with the same confident tone she had maintained throughout her initial testimony. "I was in the kitchen cleaning up after lunch," Amanda replied without hesitation. "There were a lot of dishes to wash, and I wanted to make sure everything was ready for the afternoon activities. I remember thinking about how proud I was of our family, how wonderful it was to have everyone together, and how much Lily was enjoying her time with her cousins." The CTA system registered this response as consistent with Amanda's earlier statements, but Dr. Chen noticed subtle changes in the neural patterns that suggested heightened stress levels. The machine was detecting the kind of brain activity associated with careful memory reconstruction rather than spontaneous recall, indicating that Amanda might be working harder to maintain her story than her confident demeanor suggested. As the questioning continued, Dr. Chen probed deeper into specific details about Amanda's activities and observations during that critical time period. She asked about sounds Amanda might have heard, people she might have seen, and any unusual circumstances that had caught her attention. Each question, the CTA system revealed more subtle inconsistencies in Amanda's neurological responses, suggesting that her carefully constructed narrative was beginning to show strain under technological scrutiny. The moment of truth was approaching, and Amanda Wells was about to discover that some lies are too complex to survive the scrutiny of a machine designed specifically to detect them. Her 3 years of successful deception were about to end, and with them, the carefully constructed reality that had destroyed my life and reputation. The CTA system's analysis revealed the first significant anomaly in Amanda's testimony when Dr. Chen asked her to describe the specific sounds she had heard while washing dishes in the kitchen. Amanda's response came without hesitation, her voice maintaining the same confident tone she had used throughout her testimony. But the neurological patterns displayed on the monitor told a different story entirely. I could hear the children laughing and splashing in the water, Amanda said, her eyes focused on a point just past Dr. Chen's shoulder. It was such a beautiful sound, so carefree and happy. I remember thinking how perfect the day was, how lucky we were to have such a wonderful family tradition. The water was calm, and everyone seemed to be having such a good time. The monitor showed a sudden spike in activity in the regions of Amanda's brain associated with creative construction rather than memory retrieval. Dr. Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight narrowing of her eyes as she observed the readings. The machine was detecting what appeared to be fabricated details being inserted into Amanda's narrative, suggesting that her description of the sounds from the lake area might not be based on actual memories. Amanda continued her description with elaborate detail, explaining how she had been able to distinguish between different children's voices and even identify specific games they had been playing. She described hearing Lily's distinctive giggle, the sound of water splashing as the children played, and the general atmosphere of joy and safety that had pervaded the lake area during those final minutes of my daughter's life. But the CT system was revealing a troubling pattern in Amanda's neural activity. The brain regions associated with auditory memory showed minimal activation while she described these sounds, suggesting that she might not have actually heard the things she was claiming to remember. Instead, the areas responsible for imagination and creative storytelling were lighting up like a Christmas tree, indicating that Amanda was constructing her account in real time rather than recalling genuine experiences. Dr. Chen pressed deeper into this apparent inconsistency, asking Amanda to be more specific about the timeline of sounds she had heard. When had the children's laughter been loudest? At what point had she last heard Lily's voice? Were there any moments when the sounds from the lake area had seemed unusual or concerning? Amanda's responses became increasingly detailed, but the CTA's readings grew more alarming with each elaboration. The machine was detecting the classic neural patterns associated with fabricated memories. Stories that had been created through repeated telling rather than experienced firsthand. Her brain activity showed the telltale signs of someone working hard to maintain a constructed narrative rather than simply recalling events as they had actually happened. The implications of these readings were staggering. If Amanda hadn't actually heard the sound she was describing, it meant that her entire account of being in the kitchen during the critical time period was potentially false. The alibi that had protected her from suspicion for 3 years was beginning to crumble under the relentless scrutiny of the CTA's system. Michael's reaction to his sister's increasingly detailed testimony was becoming more pronounced. His confidence in Amanda's story had been absolute for 3 years, but now I could see doubt creeping across his features. He was leaning forward. In his seat, his brow furrowed as he listened to Amanda describe sounds and conversations that he might not remember hearing himself. The seeds of suspicion were finally being planted in fertile ground. Robert Carter's face had gone pale as he watched the neurological readings fluctuate wildly during Amanda's testimony. As a successful businessman, he understood the importance of credibility and consistency. The erratic patterns being displayed on the monitor suggested that his daughter's story was far less solid than he had believed, and the potential consequences for his family's reputation were becoming increasingly apparent. Amanda herself seemed oblivious to the technological betrayal taking place just feet away from her. Her confidence remained unshakable. Bolstered by 3 years of successful deception and the belief that her performance had been perfect, she continued to elaborate on her memories with the same assured tone, apparently unaware that every word was being analyzed and found wanting by the STSE, testicated equipment monitoring her every response. Dr. Chen shifted her questioning to focus on Amanda's physical location during the critical time period. If Amanda had been in the kitchen washing dishes, she should have specific memories about the layout of the space, the items she had been cleaning, and her line of sight to various parts of the lake area. These details would be crucial in determining whether her alibi was based on actual experience or careful fabrication. "Can you describe the view from the kitchen window?" Dr. Chen asked, her tone remaining professionally neutral, despite the dramatic readings being displayed on the monitor. "What could you see of the lake area from where you were standing?" Amanda's response came smoothly, as if she had prepared for this exact question. She described the kitchen window's position, the angle of view it provided, and the specific areas of the lake that would have been visible from that vantage point. Her description was remarkably detailed and seemed to demonstrate intimate familiarity with the lake house's layout and sightlines. But the CTA's system was revealing a different truth. Amanda's neural patterns showed minimal activation in the areas responsible for spatial memory and visual recall. Instead, the regions associated with logical reasoning and problem-solving were working overtime, suggesting that she was calculating her responses based on knowledge of the lake house's layout, rather than recalling actual visual memories from that day. The distinction was crucial. Someone who had actually been standing at the kitchen window would have visual memories of what they had seen. Memories that would activate specific regions of the brain associated with sight and spatial awareness. Amanda's patterns suggested that she was constructing her description based on general knowledge rather than specific recollections, indicating that she might not have been where she claimed to be during those critical minutes. Dr. Chen continued to probe Amanda's supposed memories of the kitchen activities, asking about specific dishes she had washed, the order in which she had cleaned different items, and any interruptions or distractions she might have encountered. With each question, the CTA's readings became more concerning, revealing a pattern of fabricated details and constructed memories that cast serious doubt on Amanda's entire account. The courtroom atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the implications of the technological analysis became clear to everyone present. Amanda's confident testimony was being systematically dismantled by a machine that couldn't be charmed, manipulated, or deceived by her polished performance. The neurological evidence was painting a picture of someone who had constructed an elaborate fiction rather than recalling genuine memories. Amanda's description of washing dishes became increasingly elaborate, with specific details about water, temperature, soap bubbles, and the particular challenges of cleaning various serving pieces. But the CTA system revealed that these details were being generated by the creative regions of her brain rather than retrieved from actual memories. She was essentially writing fiction in real time, creating a plausible but false narrative to support her alibi. The most damning evidence came when Dr. Chen asked Amanda to describe the exact moment when she had first realized something was wrong. According to her testimony, she had heard shouting from the lake area and had immediately dropped what she was doing to rush outside. This should have been a traumatic and clearly remembered moment, the kind of experience that would be seared into memory with perfect clarity. But Amanda's neural patterns showed something entirely different. The brain regions associated with traumatic memory formation were barely active, while the areas responsible for storytelling and creative construction were firing rapidly. The CTA system was detecting the classic signs of a fabricated crisis narrative, suggesting that Amanda's dramatic description of hearing the emergency and rushing to help was based on imagination rather than actual experience. The readings became even more troubling when Amanda described finding me on the dock, screaming for help and pointing toward the water where Lily had disappeared. Her account of this moment was vivid and emotionally charged, with specific details about my appearance, behavior, and the exact words I had supposedly spoken. But the CTA's analysis revealed that these details were being constructed rather than remembered, indicating that Amanda might not have witnessed this scene at all. Dr. Chen's expression remained professionally composed, but I could see the growing concern in her eyes as she watched the monitor display increasingly damning evidence of deception. The CTA's system was revealing that virtually every aspect of Amanda's testimony about her whereabouts and activities during the critical time period was fabricated, calling into question not just her specific memories, but her entire version of events. The implications were staggering. If Amanda hadn't been in the kitchen washing dishes, if she hadn't heard the children playing, if she hadn't witnessed my supposed panic and distraction, then where had she been? What had she been doing during those crucial minutes when Lily had supposedly drowned? And most importantly, what did she know about my daughter's death that she wasn't telling anyone? Michael's face had gone white as he watched the neurological evidence mount against his sister. The woman he had defended for 3 years, the sister he had chosen to believe over his own wife, was being revealed as a systematic liar whose testimony couldn't withstand technological scrutiny. The foundation of his certainty about that terrible day was crumbling before his eyes. Amanda herself remained oblivious to the technological betrayal taking place around her. Her confidence was so complete, her belief in her own performance so absolute, that she continued to elaborate on her false memories with the same assured tone. She had no idea that every word was being analyzed and found wanting by equipment, specifically designed to detect the kind of deception she had perfected. Over 3 years of practice, the first crack in Amanda's story had become a gaping chasm, and the CTA system was preparing to reveal even more devastating evidence about what had really happened the day my daughter died. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right? On your screen, if this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.